Talking about Kim, we didn't get any plush toys today.
know. I won't get made fun of. So Ken.
oh no, he still commissioned me to do that.
Oh, Ken's obviously Australian, and their sense of humor. If they're not making fun of you, they probably don't like you. So that's just the way it is. So I've learned to live with that.
Yeah.
So people are getting on here, and if you're getting on, make sure to send those emojis across so that we know that you're here. And Bodie and I are following along on Ken Ham's Facebook page as well as the Answers in Genesis Facebook page.
Yeah, there we are. All right, people are hopping
so
on
that
here as
we
well.
can see your comments. So you can put where you're from and send those emojis so the reach of the video goes out further.
Yep.
And we have a lovely studio audience with us today.
Yeah, here, make yourselves known. Yeah, there you go.
All right, awesome.
Yep, and I have a shout out all the way down south, Caleb Haynes.
Okay.
His wife is here, Gabriella is here, and she is in Answers News. He faithfully watches Answers News,
Awesome.
so I want to give a shout out to him. So.
All right, well, we're going to do some fluff and stuff, okay, to start out while people are kind of getting on and figuring out that we're on the air right now. So the first thing I want to mention is our Explore camps, which are our 5-day summer camps that we're offering brand new this year. We've got one actually going on this week right now, but we do have another one coming up at the end of July. And these have just, I've talked to Jennifer.
They're floating. They're going
yeah,
really
I've talked
good,
to Jennifer, who's the head of that program, and she said they're having a wonderful time this week. It's for 4th grade through 12th grade. Lots of, it's a day camp, so it's a lot of hands-on workshops throughout the day. And actually today, they're not starting for about another hour. They're going to stay overnight. You get to stay overnight at the Creation Museum and get to do astronomy. Explore astronomy, and then they'll have another day tomorrow.
Good for them. And that's on site right here at the Creation Museum.
Right, it's on site here at the Creation Museum, and so the register to let me flip that. The deadline to register is June 27th, so you can go online. We'll put the link there, and you can find out more about that. Lots of really fun stuff, so I encourage you to check that out.
Too, you know.
Yeah, it is. All right, so guess what? America's favorite vegetable is broccoli.
I don't know who they did they not forget to tell people that fries come from potatoes or something?
Well, according to the survey, now this was done by Green Giant, okay, the vegetable guy, so to speak, and they did a survey. So this was open-ended, so people had to participate.
Yeah, they went to the broccoli farms and they asked them what. No,
So 4,000 Americans, almost 4,000 Americans responded. So you can see by state what was the most popular vegetable. So here in the Midwest, we have a lot of corn, obviously, that people like. But I guess as you get out further west or further east or further south, they tend to like broccoli. That won by 47%.
So do potatoes win for Idaho or not?
No, peas.
Doesn't look like it.
Peas were Idaho. That was the only state that liked peas
wow.
the most. You know what? My favorite is Brussels sprouts.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
No, seriously.
My.
If you chop them in half and you get lots of like salt and butter and like pepper on them and roast them in the oven, they're amazing.
I don't believe
they're like
you.
Candy. They're good. All right. So Brussels sprouts didn't even make
Go
it.
potatoes.
I'm so sad. All right. So this is the one that you brought up, Bodie.
Okay, I saw this one and I'm like, oh, wow, look at this. I can see why this confused the teachers. I guess they've been pulling their hair out trying to figure out who's who. 17 pairs of identical twins in this school. And, they took a picture of a bunch of them. I actually saw a different picture where they had them all kind of running around. I'm like, how would they possibly keep these kids straight? But
yeah,
17
and
pairs.
they said it's kind of become a thing. Like now, if a couple has a set of twins, to send them to this school. And I'm like, those poor teachers. Like when I taught school, it was always like I could barely remember students' names most of the time. Much less if they looked like each other, I'd really be in trouble. Yeah. But they have 8 pairs of girls, 6 pairs of boys, and 3 pairs that are brothers and sisters. So.
Yeah, they just look quite
fun.
similar.
Yeah, that's really fun. And they all, of course, it's a uniform school too. So it's not like they can even wear different things, right? They have to wear the same thing, making it even more confusing.
And of course, look, they put their hair the same way just to mess with those teachers.
I know. That's just cruel and unusual. All right, and here's another one. Bodie's good at finding fluff and stuff. He likes to do this, so. Son's hilarious, embarrassing sign welcoming mom home at the airport goes viral.
Now, apparently she was just on a business trip. And you know what husbands do sometimes. Hey, son, hold this sign up to welcome mommy home. And so there it was. And apparently she took it in stride, you know.
She did.
And I had a good time with it. But
I'm not sure he could even read the sign. He's
He
probably
may not
totally
have.
oblivious. Like, oh, look,
Mom,
Mom, you
welcome
know.
home.
Oh, that'll be fun when he grows up to explain that one to
Yeah.
him. So now, I thought maybe the business trip was like prison. You
Oh,
know,
you
because
know, it might
sometimes
have
they
been.
can be pretty
It
harsh.
could have
but,
been, yeah. Working for a prison, maybe. I don't know.
All right, so getting lots of people
Yeah, we got a lot of people
on.
hopping on here.
Somebody said Brussels sprouts are in the same family as broccoli. That may be, but they don't taste the same. Just saying. So.
I had somebody here from Texas saying, well, broccoli's not their favorite food, even though that's what's the one for Texas.
Somebody said the Arc restaurant makes awesome Brussels sprouts. Why have I not? Oh, I need to get back out there again.
Hey, it popped on here. Joe Owen is watching. Joe Owen heads up
good.
our office out of Mexico.
In Mexico,
And
yeah.
so a lot of Latin American places, you know, if they want to get in touch with Answers in Genesis, that's a great way to reach them.
Our Spanish office is very busy all the time.
Well, so is our Peruvian office, you know, for South America. They keep quite busy
great.
as well.
All right, so let's get into some real news now.
All right.
The first land-walking vertebrates may have emerged from salty estuaries. Okay, so this is talking about the Earth's earliest land-walking vertebrates that supposedly arose about 375 million years ago. And they used to think that they had come from freshwater lakes. Now they think it's brackish waters.
Right, kind of half salty, half
Yeah, so
half
this
fresh.
is the Ichthyostega and the Acanthostega are the supposedly some of the earliest ancestors to
That's what they claim.
amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. So here's your however great grandfather, right? I mean, that's what they're claiming that creature
That's
is.
what they presume in the story. And, you know, I want to emphasize the word story. And the fact is, there's a lot of storytelling even in this. I mean, this is all pure guesswork for people to make such a claim. I mean, here's the thing. God created certain creatures on day 5 and certain creatures on day 6, and that's not a problem. We see variation within them. The problem is they start looking in rock layers from the flood of Noah's day, which occurred about 1,650 years later, and they say, oh, well, this is found at this one particular level, therefore maybe this was changing into this at this particular rock layer. No. We got to go back. We got to think biblically on this stuff.
Right.
You know, you're looking at flood sediment at that point. You know, all these creatures buried here around this same what they want to call a period, we're all buried during the flood.
Well, and it's not surprising that the water, you know, they're assuming, they say, they do this based on isotopes of different radioactive elements. So they say the sulfur isotope that is there is usually associated with seawater, but the oxygen isotope that's there is normally associated with fresh water. So then they draw the conclusion that it was sort of something in between, which kind of makes sense from a flood perspective.
Yeah,
that you
'cause you're
might
gonna get
not,
some
we
mixing
don't know
here and
how
there.
salty the oceans were to begin with. So it kind of, in some ways, you know, that may help us understand more about what the floodwaters were really like.
Yeah, it could have been.
So-
And you know, one of the things you see, you know, when you see freshwater merge with salt waters, they sometimes stay separated for quite some time. And so, you know, you probably had pockets of fresh water, pockets of saltier water throughout the duration of a big portion of the flood.
Right, yeah. So, you know, but it's their story that's constantly changing, right?
Yeah.
Always over and over again.
Yep, and it's
But
a story.
the Bible doesn't, so.
You have to be discerning on that.
Yeah.
Hey, notice my mug. My mug was actually a bit dirty, so I'm like, you know what?
Yeah, things floating.
I mean, I clean that thing once every 6 months, whether I need to or not. No.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm like, I'll just
Too
drink
much
out of the bottle
information
today.
there. All right. How did dino-era birds survive the asteroid apocalypse? So, anyways, they say, and I love the way they start out this article. When a 9-mile-wide asteroid struck Earth 66 million years ago.
Hey, is that science?
Not if, when. In other words, it definitely happened.
They've not observed this. They've not repeated this. I mean, you got to be very careful about that kind of stuff.
So it killed off, so it wiped out 3/4 of life on Earth, including the non-avian dinosaurs. Now,
A non-avian dinosaur is a dinosaur.
right, yeah. The reason they say that is because, you know, a lot of evolutionists, or not all of them, but a vast majority of them believe that dinosaurs evolved from birds. Birds evolved.
Now-
Why am I mixing things up? Birds evolved from dinosaurs. So there's avian dinosaurs, which are birds, and then there's non-avian dinosaurs. So it's just amazing.
Yeah, the terminology really messes with people. But you know, a lot of evolutionists for a long time would say an asteroid came in and killed all the dinosaurs. Well, now they're saying they only killed about 3/4 of them on the Earth. And then there's another group that says, well, you know, if there was a meteorite, well, it affected certain things, but then dinosaurs then evolved into birds. This is kind of like a model that's mixing those two.
Right.
Trying to say it killed out most of them, but there's still
not
some.
all of them.
And then they say those are the ones that then evolved into birds.
Right, because they say what happened was it caused deforestation because obviously, you know, this asteroid hitting would cause a lot of fires and things like that. And so it wiped out the forest. So the only birds that survived were the ground-dwelling birds, not the tree-dwelling birds.
That's what they claimed.
That's what they claim.
Yeah. So here's the problem is when I read this article, I go, hold on a second here. They're making the assumption that dinosaurs lived all this, you know, millions of years in their story, all the way up to the Cretaceous, boom, all this happens. Some of the dinosaurs survive, and then they evolve into birds. Here's what they didn't tell you. In those same dinosaur rock layers, guess what we find? We find loons, which is a bird, it's a duck-like creature, sandpipers, flamingos, parrots, penguins, owls, avocets, albatross, and a number of other birds. Okay, so we need to keep in mind that that's evidence that those things were in the same rock layer as the dinosaurs, okay? In Cretaceous rock, for example. So they're assuming that it killed off all these creatures, including all those, and then dinosaurs then re-evolved into the ones we have today.
Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, that's what the fossil evidence would definitely
What they're doing is ignoring a whole bunch of this evidence of birds actually at that same
and the story doesn't explain everything because it says, well, okay, so that's why the ground-dwelling, you know, they're saying the tree-dwelling birds died off, the ground-dwelling birds are here, but then they said the data still doesn't explain why a number of, and I'll massacre this name, Enatonorathenes. That's why I need the paleontologist up here to help me. And other prehistoric birds. So it still doesn't explain why some of them still made it. I mean, because they're more apparently, they didn't live, it says they didn't live in the trees, but they also went extinct. Okay, so they were ground dwellers, but they still went extinct. So again, I don't see how this model or this idea really helps them because it doesn't explain.
No, it really doesn't.
It doesn't really explain much.
Why don't they make the argument that birds came from birds? Oh, that would be a little too biblical.
It says one of the nicest aspects of this new study is that it's testable.
How do you repeat that one?
I read that.
Let's get an asteroid, drop it on the Earth, destroy 3/4 of it, and see what happens.
Yeah, you're still interpreting the evidence in light of your worldview, in light of your starting point, and so I don't see how that's testable.
There was a statement in here that says it may have taken thousands of years for mature forests to return. The researchers say. You know, it reminds me of Surtsey in Ireland, or not Ireland, in Iceland, and what had happened. Basically, here you have this island. There's nothing on it. And all of a sudden, we get rapid growth of vegetation and forests and all sorts of stuff, a lot quicker than people seem to assume.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, we've observed that. Why would people make the assumption, well, it'd take thousands of years for this? You see, people automatically have a worldview, and they're imposing that worldview on this evidence, and they're leaving some evidence out. Sure. This is not a good article.
Yeah. No, it's not.
So.
Okay. Somebody said that asteroid carried the bird in from outer space. And it's an ongoing joke because a couple of weeks ago we had an article on here, and it was an article that's in a peer-reviewed scientific journal by scientists.
Over 30 researchers were involved.
Yeah, like 30 researchers that said octopus came from outer space. Okay. The eggs were on meteorites that came to Earth. And I'm not joking, okay? That's real. You can look it up. So, so that's the ongoing joke now is that if they can't understand something, they just say it came to Earth.
Came from asteroids.
Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
All right. Proposal would add X category to New York City birth certificate. So this in the ongoing gender identity revolution here, they're going to now add a third category for birth certificates. That's the category of X. And here's the shocking thing about this. Okay, so it's not just for individuals like that are adults today that want to change from either male or female to X, but even parents of a newborn can choose to put X on that child's birth certificate.
So if they can't figure out if it's a boy or a girl, they're going to mark X.
Now there are some legitimate cases where sadly things happen where it can be difficult to determine gender, but that's because of abnormal conditions in development or the DNA. But I mean, for a child that is distinctly male or female, and that is very obvious, the parents could still just put down X.
But I thought Facebook and some of these other places have, what, over 70 different genders now? Shouldn't they have like 70 different markers on there?
Well, that just gets too confusing, and they'd have to add to them all the time. So they just decide X is the best.
But here's the thing. If gender is something that you can just suddenly change, oh, you know what, I don't feel like that today. What would they do, you know, if somebody goes in there and like every single day goes and says, you know, I don't feel like that today. Let's go switch it. Oh, let's go switch it again. Oh, I'm going to switch it again.
Yeah,
I mean, if it's somebody's just mere opinion, I mean, that's all it is.
Right. Well, it's this whole idea that gender is somehow different from biological sex. I mean, they're trying to separate the two. And they shouldn't be, and they really can't. People are just artificially separating that. I mean, your chromosomes determine what you are. You're either XX or you're XY. Again, there are some abnormalities and things that happen. We're not, and those are different situations. But you're either male or female. I mean, there is no, and gender and biological sex are linked because of that. But again, they talk about, well, you know, we know that being able to live your authentic gender is critical to physical and mental health. Well, then how come some of these transgender people and a lot of people in those communities have the highest rates of suicide and physical problems and mental problems? And, you know, I don't think that's being helpful to them at all.
We need to be praying, you know, for that
we definitely
category
do.
of people.
Yeah.
You know, the very first line in this article says, people born in New York City who do not identify their gender as either male or female would have the option of choosing a third category for their birth certificates under a new proposal. You know, I didn't think newborns could read.
Well, they can't, but their parents can. So, yeah. So it's just sad, and it kind of, when I was reading through this article, I thought of Judges 21:25, that people just did what was right in their own eyes. And that's definitely what we're seeing today.
Yeah, we're starting to see that. So.
Yeah. Okay, church sued for $2.3 million for not hosting LGBT event in building it owns. Okay, so this has to do with, this is in Oregon, and basically a complaint was filed against a church because they owned like this event center, and because the church owned the event center, the church it's a Catholic church, and they said, well, we believe marriage is between one man and one woman, so you can't host any LGBT related events there. So now the event center is suing the church because it can't host these events.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of convoluted with what all is going on, because there's a separate group, a company that rents the facility from the church. And that's where it all comes out. So they're claiming $2.3 million in damages. Right. And they're trying to go from that perspective. So, you know, I'm waiting to see what's going to play out with all this, because this is kind of a strange situation, you know, because it's not really the church that was running the events. Right. It was a third party that was running the events, but then they're renting from a church, and it's sad because again, it's another example of you're not allowed to live out your Christian faith or your beliefs. You have to conform to what everyone else says, basically. You're being made to conform. So it's okay for them to live out their beliefs that they want to live out, their LGBT beliefs, but it's not okay for me to live out my Christian belief. And that's, again, it's a prejudice of one basically over the other. In essence, that's really what it is. Yeah, that's really what it is. And you know, as I read this, I'm like, okay, I want to see what's going to happen. I really do. Just because, you know, there's so many things involved in this particular situation. So it kind of reminds me of the Christian baker and things like that, you know, because you have certain situations, you know, where, you know, it is church property, but then what do you do when you rent that out to someone else? You know, how's that going to play out? I could see what a lot of churches would do is say, well, you know what, none of these businesses can rent from us anymore. You know, so I can see something like that. Or maybe the church will say, well, yeah, you know what, you can rent it, but it's going to start costing $2.3 million every month. Yeah. You know, I mean,
well, and the thing is that one of the things I've seen them try to do is take this whole issue of LGBT and say, well, if you prejudice against them you can't do that because of the Civil Rights Act. And that said you can't prejudice. Well, yeah, but there was very specific language used in that.
Right.
And that had to do with things like you can't prejudice against people because of their, whether they're male or female, whether they're a different ethnicity. And those are all things that would be supported in Scripture.
But what about
as
X?
well.
I mean, if you can't discriminate between male and female, what about X?
Yeah. But the intention of that act was very different from how people are trying to apply it and use it today. And so that's where I always get upset when they try to link those two, which is what they're trying to do here, because they're very different things. Okay, somebody says, hello from Crazy Phonia. Oh, California, okay. I was like, what is that place? And I'm like, okay, I get it. And somebody said, in starting to believe aliens exist, this gender nonsense is clearly from another world. It is getting pretty crazy. Okay, and on that note, Indiana teacher forced to resign over school's transgender policy. So this is in Brownsburg, Indiana. And basically, that's
not too far from us. That's just a couple hours.
Yeah, it's not too far from here. This is an orchestra teacher who basically did not want to call students by their preferred names, which represent other genders. He wanted to call them by their given names, and so
their last names. Yeah.
Right. Well, that was the compromise he reached with the school.
Well, yeah, for last year, but this year they said no. You must address people by what they want to be called. You know, so if George wants to be Georgina or something like that, and their preferred pronouns and things like that. But of course, preferred pronouns can change every day because people can change their mind all the time.
It gets really confusing. Yeah, and so what got me about this was, here's the teacher, and he says the reason he doesn't want to do it is because he thinks that it's dangerous to these students, this idea that you can change your gender, that you can be something else. He says, I don't want to do that. I don't want to participate in that because I don't believe it's healthy. I don't believe it's right.
Look at the suicide statistics in that. It's much higher increase rates for that kind of stuff.
He cares about his students.
Yeah, I think he really did.
That's what it shows, I think. But it's not. And the thing is there was a compromise reached, but that's never enough. That's what we have to realize. Just reaching that compromise is never enough. They want total commitment and endorsement of what they believe, and nothing else will do.
Right. The school district is imposing a particular religious view onto him, and he must follow it in their schools. Yeah. And that's one of the things we need to be aware of. A lot of times, we think of public schools, they're neutral. Not necessarily. So you have to be very careful that parents be discerning on those issues. Yeah.
So. And so we hope that and this school also has a bathroom policy that members of the opposite sex, if they identify as a different sex than they were born with, are allowed to use the bathroom of their choice. And so it becomes a safety issue as well, obviously, within the schools there. So I'm hoping that he gets some good legal support for his case and is able to be able to stay a teacher there. He's obviously one of those teachers you want. He cares about his students. He genuinely does. And so we want him in the school system.
We'll see what plays out with this one as well.
See how that plays out.
Yeah.
Okay. Twitter chief grilled over Chick-fil-A. Kind of a funny title there. So this is the Twitter CEO, Jack Dorsey. And basically, so all he did, was tweet boost at Chick-fil-A. Okay, so it's about this, I'm not familiar with the app, but it's a new cash app where he saved money. And so he posted about that on Twitter, which he's the CEO of. And what do you think happened?
Oh boy. It lit up.
Firestorm.
Oh my goodness, hate groups were all over him. Like, how dare you support that Christian place? And I mean, they really did. They had to go at him because they're like, hold on a second, Chick-fil-A, they believe that marriage is a man and a woman. They believe the Bible. How dare you go there? And what does he do? He essentially sent out an apology. Oh, yeah, sorry, forgot about that.
And this is Pride Month, right? So they said, well, basically, how dare you even do this during Pride Month? And I thought
Pride Month. Did you ever think about Pride Month? Pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. What are the months for the other deadly sins?
Yeah. Well, we don't have one of those, but it just said, it's just ludicrous to me to think that somebody has to apologize for eating at a restaurant because its owners hold to this belief.
And you know what? Chick-fil-A has been attacked for this for numerous years. You know, I remember there was a supposed boycott, and then they had a business boom as a result of the boycott.
Yep.
But, you know, consider, say, Islam. You know, in Islam, you know, they oppose homosexuality and lesbianism, gay, things like that as well. Do we see this type of attack on places that say, oh, we're going to offer a halal, you know, basically the Muslim diet menu as well? You know, I mean, KFC has that, Outback Steakhouse, places like that. Are they being attacked?
Yeah, no.
I mean, no, it's, but Christian places.
Yeah, that's...
You'll notice it's Christian places over and over again.
Well, it even says Chick-fil-A is currently ranked in the top 10 restaurants in America and is forecasted to be the 3rd largest food chain by 2020. So they're not suffering, that's for sure. Well, no, and that's a good thing. It's good to see them being successful. And some people, not everybody thought, there were even some people that, you know, that said, like one person even said, I'm gay and I love Chick-fil-A. This is ridiculous.
That was one of the
you know, kind of like, get over it. I mean, the guy's eating at a restaurant, you know, and so it's sad. But it just shows you, again, that you have to conform, even where you
it says in the article here, to them, it's a given that everyone in America thinks like them, that no one in their right mind would even consider eating at a restaurant operated by someone who believes that marriage is a union between a man and a woman.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's out of touch, you know, with those who follow the Bible, Christianity, and so forth.
Somebody says, this restaurant is the lifeblood of college students. How dare you infringe my right to survive by taking away my only affordable source of food? So,
and like the article says, you can get grilled over it. So.
Yeah. Somebody else said, I declare next month to be theft month. You know, I mean, if we're going to have Pride Month, why can't we have Theft Month? I mean, why can't that be okay to do? Yeah, that's the problem with that. All right. What really lies at the root of our culture's suicide epidemic? So probably many of you heard in the news that Anthony Bourdain, who's kind of a guy that goes around, tries different foods, different restaurants and things like that. He killed himself. And then Kate Spade.
Was that because he couldn't go to Chick-fil-A or?
No. Kate Spade, who is a fashion designer, she also killed herself the week before, I think.
And she is the sister-in-law to David Spade.
Oh, well, I didn't know that.
I believe
okay.
that, yeah. Who's the famous comedian.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Yes. And so, and it's really sad. And Kate Spade was married, had a 13-year-old daughter. I think about that. My daughter's not much older than that. And it just breaks my heart to think that somebody could, you know, think that life is so bad that they have no choice but to commit suicide. And so this article kind of goes through and talks about it and saying that we want to blame it. We want to say, well, there's a mental health crisis. You know, they want to blame it on mental illness.
You're right. And yet we see the rates massively increasing here in recent times. So people are saying, well, you know, I mean, it's, you know.
And we know about mental health. We're more proactive about mental health now than we've ever been. So that can't be why all of this is happening. And it says, and I like what he says here, he says, people are told that there is only one life, one reality, and has no meaning aside from what you assign to it, which is a very, very evolutionary idea. Life has no ultimate meaning and purpose. It's whatever you decide. That's what any good evolutionist should tell you.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, if everything came from nothing, which is what Big Bang essentially teaches, you're going to nothing, nothing ultimately matters. People start to think like that.
Right.
You know, one of the things that says in here in the article says, I think that the problem is emptiness. There's an emptiness at the core of our culture, and from the root, the suicide epidemic grows. We have fled from God, from meaning, from purpose, and embraced a soft kind of nihilism, a nihilism that will not call itself nihilism. You know, nihilism is the religion that says there are no religions, which is kind of self-refuting in and of itself. But it's this view that there's just nothing matters. And people start living like that, and they say, well, why not kill yourself?
Yeah, and I think, too, it has to do a lot with the way we live our lives, too. I'm very technologically savvy society, which technology is good when it's used properly, but people are really feeling isolated and empty. I was talking to a guy who works for Campus Crusade for Christ, or CREW is what it's called now, and he was saying on a major university campuses, they find atheists and agnostics and things coming to their small group meetings, not because they believe what's being said at those by the people that are leading the small group, but because they're lonely. And I thought, that just shows you how lonely people are. They want that interaction. They want that friendship. They're just so lonely. And of course they should be. As atheists and agnostics, I'm thinking, you know, when you have no ultimate meaning and purpose in life, you're searching. It shows they're really looking for something, I think, beyond friendship and beyond that. So we do have to go to more the root of this. The root is not just it's a mental illness. It's much, much more than that. And that people need the gospel. They need Jesus Christ. That is the one true hope that does give meaning and purpose.
Yeah, and you know, this is a serious situation. You know,
it is very much so.
There's been a lot of people committing suicide. In fact, as most people nowadays can almost point to somebody that they know that has committed suicide. You know, I can point to some people that I've known, and you know, it breaks my heart to hear that. But you know, a lot of people say, well, you know what? Hopefully they're at peace now, and you know, they've left all the troubles of the world behind. But have they?
But and that's encouraging suicide almost, because it's saying, well, look, if you do this,
you got your way out. But you know, we have to be careful. You know, Revelation 14:11, those not in Christ, you know, there's going to be no rest, day or night, forever and ever. There will be no peace. The wrath of God will be upon them. And that's what eternal punishment is. So you know, I want to encourage people. You know, there is purpose, there is meaning, but it's not found in that worldview. You know, I want to encourage people to actually go back to the Bible, read it. You know, if you're ever contemplating suicide, first thing you should do is just say, well, let's take a pause and let's read the Bible first. I want to encourage people to do that. Go back and say, hey, hold on a second. Man is made in the image of God. We do have value.
We do have hope.
And there is hope. But that's only found in the blood of Jesus Christ, who died for the sins of all mankind.
Very true. That's the good part. All right, so this is an archaeology one. I knew you'd like this one.
You know, I like archaeology. You know, it's not my background, but I've always loved it.
He likes it, though. This is the sculpted head of mystery biblical king found in Israel. And so this was, it dates about 3,000 years ago, and it's set in 9th century BC. And they basically found it in the floor of a large building that they were trying to dig through. And so what do you think about this, Bodie? You're more than...
Well, I'm pretty sure that this figurine was beheaded.
Okay, well, that's helpful.
Actually, you know, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, that looks like a Lego. That's what popped into my head.
Ancient Legos.
But, you know, I mean, there's a lot of ancient figurines, a lot of so-called gods and so on. You know, so I mean, those things are very common. One of the things that the article said is this actually matched the way that a lot of Egyptians would model a lot of Semitic people, you know, a lot of people there in the Middle East. And, you know, there's the possibility that this was an item that they had built and it's by trade. Some people thought, well, you know, if you look at it, you can presume that's a gold crown on there, and so therefore maybe it was one of the kings. Now, I do question the date. You know, they have a tendency to be way off on their dates, especially when you're relying on things like radiometric dating methods that just run into a lot of problems. But, you know, I mean, what we know is, it's a unique piece. It gives you an idea of the quality that certain people can do, number one.
Because they say a lot of times from this era, there's not a lot of high quality stuff, but this seems to be very high quality.
Yeah, I mean, well, you got to think too, you know, you go back, you know, a lot of items are damaged, they're weathered and things like that too. Here, I mean, this one here was preserved in pretty good condition. So it's a fascinating piece. What can we know from it?
I don't think we're going to find out who it is, but it is found in the town it was found in is a town that's actually mentioned in Scripture.
In Scripture, yep.
So Abel Beth Makkah is listed in 1 Kings. And so it's found in an area where, and they think a period of time when biblical kings would have been, you know, around. So who knows?
Well, this figurine, it's using like a glass on it as well as some copper. So I mean, it was done really well.
Very well done.
I want to encourage people to study this because I think they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, he likes to do the puns. And on that pun, we're out of time.
We're out of time.
Sorry, we're going to end today. We'll get to the rest of these on Monday, but you have a book?
We do have a book here. This is actually a book on archaeological finds and things like that. A lot of things, particularly that are mentioned in the British Museum, which I've been to. But Clive Anderson and Brian Edwards put this book together. It is a beautiful full-color book with all sorts of different finds and a little information about it. Wonderful book. If you guys like anything at all about archaeology, this is an incredible book. So I want to encourage you to take a look at that. Again, it's called Evidence for the Bible.
Yep. All right. See you.
God bless you guys.
Well, thank you, folks. Thanks for having me here. Now, Dr. Turner will be at the